Here's a funny question I get asked all the time, and it's funny to me because I've programmed for so long. And that question is, what is a programmer? People often wonder what I do day in, day out. And it's often like that with highly paid professions. You don't actually know what people are doing. I mean, sure, maybe you've heard of code and programming in general, but maybe you don't know exactly what it is. So I'm going to explain it here. If we have some kind of computer, this could be anything. It could be the device you carry in your pocket these days. And we give it some kind of input, say from a keyboard, a mouse, a touch, whatever it is. It can even be some kind of voice-activated input. The computer needs a way to translate that language you've given it into two things. First of all, what should I do with it? And then it also needs to translate that what into something called machine or bytecode. These are just ones and zeros that a computer understands and that a human normally doesn't understand, although I know a few geeks that would actually understand binary code. That's a bit sad. I've never stooped that low, but I may one day. So, how does this relate to a programmer? Well, a programmer is the guy that sits in the middle of this process. And what he does is he writes programs that anticipate what kind of input or restrict the kind of input that you're allowed to give the computer. So if we have our computer, then your input comes in. Your programmer is the guy that's translating the input into those two things. What do I do with it? And two, how does the computer actually run it? So when you look at a programmer typing a screen full of code, all he's doing is being actually a glorified translator. He's translating what he wants the people using his software to do into something that the computer can understand in ones and zeros, and finally, of course, what to do after it's processed the ones and zeros, which is really to display something to you, a result or something similar to that. So really, being a programmer is, in a way, just like being a translator. You're taking one person's language, that's humanity in general, so English, French, Spanish, whatever language, it doesn't matter. You're taking those inputs and then you're translating them into a language that the computer can understand, right? But it's not only that. The programmer is actually the guy that designs the interface not just between humans and computers, but between computers and computers. Because by default, computers aren't actually clever at all, despite all of the Terminator movies and whatnot that you've probably seen. Without humans, computers would be nothing. They'd be really, really dumb. So a programmer is also the guy that does the following. Let's say we have two computer systems that are connected by whatever means. Wi-Fi, they can be connected over the internet. You could even have a third computer system, which could be the iPhone in your pocket. And let's say these three things want to talk to each other. So we're going round and round, a little circle, and they're sending data back and forth. Let's say, for example, you download your email on one, and you don't want to download it on the others, but you'd rather transfer the email between the different devices. That's not the best example I can give. I can give way better examples, but it'll do for now. So a programmer would be the guy that actually designs that link to go between the computers. He would design, in effect, a little language that the computers can speak to each other. And that's the language that you actually see every day, but you don't know it. So the very basic example of that is HTTP, Hypertext Transfer Protocol. Don't worry about what it means. It's basically a specification or a mini language, if you like, to allow web browsers to talk to servers. Servers are just computers, so effectively, it's just one computer talking to another computer. And the same is true when you beam out a website to your device because you've gone to probably facebook.com because you feel like wasting some time. So when you want to become a programmer, That's the very first thing you should think about, and the main principle is that you are a translator. You're taking the wishes of either a human, a computer, whatever it is that wants to talk to another computer, and you're translating it into a language that the other computer can understand. Now, a programmer, you might have one programmer. Let's say we have our 3 computers. You might have one programmer on one, you've got a second programmer on another, and a third one on a different one. You would have a team, let's say, of 10 programmers that work on the links between all of these things, for example, the HTTP. You might even have an extra programmer, let's say on your mobile device. He's the guy that makes the app. So what he can do is he can get those 10 programmers, he can use what they've made. He can also use the internal processes of programmers 1 and 2 on a computer, and he can implement that inside of an app in your iPhone. All he has to do really is lay the interface on top of the stuff that he's borrowed from the other programmers, and there you go. Right, so as my final closing words, a programmer is a glorified translator who takes instructions from one set of either people or computers, transfers it into instructions a computer can use, and then does some calculations on it. That's all a programmer is. But the important thing to know, well, the second important thing to know, is that a programmer never works in isolation. Despite what the geeky movies will have you believe, we actually are always cooperating with other programmers and other standards like HTTP when you open up a web browser. So a programmer is simply a cog in a computing machine that translates from one thing to another. Now, the beauty of that is that a programmer can be a tiny, tiny little cog. I mean, you could be the guy responsible for sending one kind of file once per day to some device somewhere. Or you could be the guy or the team of 10 guys, you could be a massive group of people that's responsible for coming up with the HTTP protocol. But, of course, each of those 10 guys is a single unit, and each one of those people would have been in charge of doing something programming-wise in that protocol. So, there's 2 things you need to take away as your definition of a programmer. You allow someone or something to communicate an intent to a computer, so the computer can do something with that intent. And 2, you are always a cog in a machine. Even if your app is just a calculator, you are using things that other programmers have created. So if you made an app on the iPhone that was just a calculator, you're actually using the programs called iOS, the operating system, that other programmers have created, and your app is going on top of that. So as a programmer, you are someone that stands on the shoulders of giants to build bigger and better things. Do you want to win prizes with your newfound knowledge? If yes, then simply head over to iamdev.net/episode 1 and take the free 2-minute test based on this episode. If you pass, then you'll earn dev points, which can be redeemed for real products on our website. So, to claim your points now, go to iamdev.net/episode 1.